listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk. Number 424.
Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Station on this, the second podcast in 2017 from the new home. I'm still juggling with the recording space, trying to maintain a good sound, so let me know if the quality you've come to expect from me drops below par. I mentioned in podcast number 423 that I will be at the Adventure Travel Show in London at the end of January, chatting to a few of the exhibitors about their services, products, all great places to visit. If you're interested in going yourself, I have a discount code available at the end of the show, which will give you 40% off the day ticket price. So listen out for that. Links, of course, are on the Outdoor Station website, and maybe if you can't make it yourself, but you see someone or something of interest on the Adventure Travel Show website, email me and I'll do my best to have a chat with them. Now, have you joined our newsletter yet? When you sign up for the Outdoor Station newsletter, you have the option to give us feedback on our shows. You also have the opportunity to suggest people of interest you would like to hear more about. You can also suggest UK campsites which you feel may be unique, and cottage manufacturers who would appreciate a little exposure to a wider audience.
The Outdoor Station, sharing the passion, appreciation and understanding for the outdoors world.
You see, our newsletter is cool, and I wanted to say hi to some of the people who have recently joined and welcome them to the Outdoor Station tribe. I'm still unsure about that word tribe, it's just far too trendy for me. However, a warm welcome to Noel Adams, Dave Ramsey, Nicholas Bates, John Dunbavin, Rich Sheward, Mark Tickner, Simon Cox, David Bruce, Stephen Sparrow and Douglas Pelchett. Some of you have been very kind with your comments, and thank you very much for that. You have also made some suggestions about who to chat to, which I'll come on to shortly. And some of you have found us via Alex Roddy's interview and the comments that he put on his blog. So a warm welcome, everyone. You see, this podcast has come about as a result of suggestions made by several people who have joined the newsletter, namely Rich Sheward, Matt Pitts, Dave King, Rich Jones and Roman Ackle, all of whom wanted to know more about Paul Stokes. Who's he? Well, he's the man behind the UK cottage business Tread Lite Gear, purveyors of handmade lightweight accessories sewn by Paul himself. One of that number, Roman Ackle, has also taken one step further and made a very generous donation via the Outdoor Station supporters page and risen to the dizzy heights of executive producer for this particular production. Thanks again, Roman. All the links to everything we discuss, of course, can be found on the Outdoor Station website. So on to the interview. Now, I caught Paul somewhere between finishing something off in Cuban fibre before he started another item in Dyneema. And so, over a cup of tea, I asked the obvious first question. How did it all begin?
It was a two-pronged attack, really. One, like anyone who wants lightweight kit, I was struggling to find it in the UK, and then I'd often order from America and, wait a long time, then pay the import duty and VAT and everything else, and then realise, well, yeah, it's good, but it's not quite what I was after. And I've got a good friend, Pete, who makes all his own equipment. And he said, well, why don't you just buy a sewing machine, teach yourself to sew and make some stuff that you need. And work was quiet. I was a surveyor by trade before this. And when the Labour government sort of left and the Lib Dem Tory alliance took over, obviously there was some huge funding cuts in the public sector. and that led to work sort of tailing off. So it was sort of like, right, I've got some spare time on my hands while I'm still being gainfully employed. I'll make some stuff. And to be fair, it was awful. And, you're watching YouTube videos and diligently copying everything you see. But eventually I stuck with it. And then I started getting some kit that I was happy with. And then friends were like, well, would you make me one? And you're like, yeah, well, fair enough. And then from there, it sort of just took off. I did it a bit sort of half-heartedly on eBay to start with. And then slowly but surely, I started increasing the lines that I was, able to put out, and I learned new construction techniques. So, things just steadily grew. And then I took a decision to close my surveying practice because all it was doing was costing me money rather than making any at that point. And I chucked all my eggs in the kit basket and got my head down and sorted out some branding, and then off we went. And yeah, that's about how it came about.
So what sort of timescales are we talking about here? How long ago did you sort of go full time?
Full time. We're just coming up to the end of the second year of basically this is my living. Prior to that, I was doing a little bit on the side, but to be honest, it wasn't worth it, as I was just paying tax on everything because I'd got a job as well. And I did it for the enjoyment initially, but then when it came to crunch time, it was like, well, what do I want to do? And 2 years ago, that was the decision we took. My wife had to go back to work full time instead of part time, which pleased her no end, and still almost daily she reminds me of that. But it's a very different life to that I had before. But it's really rewarding.
The joys of self-employment.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much unemployable by anybody else now. So this is the way it has to be, rather than, your options dwindle when you don't stay current in your profession. I've not done any development in years. So so this is it now. It's make or break.
It's interesting, actually. There's been a lot of people I know that as they've got into more mature years, they've actually reverted back to doing things they enjoy doing, or they enjoy the creativity in applying that to whatever niche they're looking at. And they all agree they're unemployable and actually starting to get more pleasure out of doing work. So are you enjoying this compared to your previous life?
Yeah, I mean, I've always, to an extent, been home based, but I used to spend an awful. I was a consultant surveyor, I guess you'd call it, and 30,000 miles a year, getting up at daft o'clock in the middle of the night to drive to Newcastle or something, or down to Kent or somewhere. It gets old fast. But I fall out of bed now and take the dog for a walk, and then wander into the workshop and start work. So it's very convenient for home life. My daughter's still quite young, so I'm around all the time. I'm not missing out on her growing up like I was when I was out all the time. So there's a lot of benefits. Obviously there's downsides. As a retailer yourself, you'll know, lumpy cash flow is no fun. And there never seems to be any rhyme or reason to it. 1 month can suddenly fall off a cliff, and then you can be in the middle of winter and thinking, well, it's going to slow down. And, first week of January is pretty much as good a week as I've ever had in the main season. So, it's bizarre. But no, I do genuinely love it. People say to me, what do you do? I say, well, I sew all day. But moreover, normally I've just got a tablet on the end of my sewing station. I just watch TV box sets all day. And then at the end of the day, I turn around and I've made a load of stuff. It's almost like the work's just a sideline to watching TV for a living. Yeah. Well,
you're absolutely right what you say about self-employment, and certainly from a manufacturing stroke retailing point of view. I think where it differs for people doing service type work like plumbers or electricians, they always seem to have a steady 2 or 3 weeks worth of work lined up. But I think you and I, and probably many people like us, as you say, sometimes you're looking at the order book and think there's nothing there, and then other times it's as you can't cope. So famine or feast, as they say.
Indeed. I'm a lot less stressed about it these days. In October 15, things were really bad. we'd had, I kept the old business running too long, and that just, left me with a bit of debt overhang. And then suddenly, you'd have a really bad month and you think, Christ, I've got to pay the mortgage. But something always seems to come up. I'm always a big believer, if you work hard enough, you make your own luck. So,
absolutely.
You always find a way to get by and then, onwards and upwards. But it's not fun though. That's the one element I really don't like. Regular wage is a nice thing to have. But then, the flip side is I only answer to me, and the wife.
which are hard taskmaster at the best of times, aren't they?
Absolutely.
So let's actually just look at the sewing, because strangely enough, I taught myself sewing. Well, let's put it the other way around. Rose threw the sewing machine at me because she got fed up with me saying, "Come on, how do you do this? How do you do that? Learn it yourself and get on with it." And I started making tarps and all various things, which is right at the beginning of what we were doing. So for people who are listening that might want to attempt to do their own sewing and steal their sewing machine from their partners, because let's face it generally does tend to be the ladies in the household that have them, how easy did you find learning it, and how did you go about learning the skills that you now take for granted?
I think when you start, obviously, I had no background in fabric technology or anything like that. I didn't know one end of a nylon from another, and it was sort of like, I literally watched YouTube videos. And I think the thing I'd advise people to do is just play with it. Just have some fun, get some cheap material. I think the first thing I ever sewn, I'd bought an MSR tent on eBay that was ripped, and for not a lot of money, I got a reasonable amount of sil nylon and inner tent, and I just started chopping it up and practicing seams. And then once I could sew a straight seam, I started trying to actually make something usable. And it will look like a dog's dinner as long as it's structurally sound when you're first starting out. That's all you need. But I think the machine's important as well. I sew pretty much exclusively on old Singers. My main user is a Singer 201K. They're great machines. You don't need anything apart from a screwdriver to look after it and a drop of oil. You've got to be prepared to put some work in cleaning them down, because most of them have been sat in Granny's loft for 60, 70 years and done not a lot. But if you take the time with them and get them cleaned up, they're fantastic machines, and they lay down a neater stitch than pretty much anything else I use. So, but no, it's just practice. And I think after a while, you get to the point where initially when you start out, you're just copying. You're looking at YouTube videos and saying, right, I'm going to copy that. And after a bit, once you sort of get your head around the basics, you then start to think for yourself and think, right, well, how can I apply that to gear? What can I do that's different to what's out there? And, it is really rewarding. It's not so cheap, though, these days, to be honest. I mean, back in the day, you could make yourself an underquilt and save a lot of money over and above what you might have to pay for a maker to do it for you. But these days now, fabrics are not cheap, and down and things like that's really expensive. So some projects you get to the point where you think, do you know what, it's just easier to pay UK hammocks or hammock gear in the States and let them do it. And that's one of the reasons I don't make the big ticket items like tarps, packs, tents. There's just diminishing returns. I found that if you can keep it small and neat, then you know what's going under the sewing machine foot. You can work out your hourly profit rate, and it just keeps things ticking a lot more.
Very interesting, actually. You hit a lot of points there in that comment. What I've done prior to this interview is put out a few questions or a note on Facebook asking people if they had any questions for you. And you've actually just answered one, but I'm going to bring them in from time to time as we talk, if you don't mind. And you've actually answered the question that came in from Ken Thompson, was what gear do you use to make gear, the type of setup and the type of machine. And he's seen some really neat stuff from you. And then also Norman Reeves said, Stormy Norman said, when is Paul going to go into tent and tarp custom made items? And I think you just answered both those questions in that last piece.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, Bob. I think it's something I would like. My biggest problem with the bigger stuff is, if you're going to make a decent length tarp, say a hammock tarp with doors, for instance, you need a cutting table 4 meters by 2 meters, and I just don't have the space for that. And, I could clear floor space for it, but crawling around the floor is no way to work. So, I mean, I eventually do see premises. And when I get premises, I think, potentially I could move up to bigger stuff. But, I've got a friend who's got great backpacking skills in terms of making rucksacks. And, I keep saying to him, do it. And he said, well, I've looked at what it'll cost to get the fabric in and what I can sell it for. And to be honest, there's not enough money in it. I mean, I do take my hats off to, people like Tracker Tent, who, finally giving the UK something decent in lightweight loveliness. But it's hard graft, and big items like that, they take a lot of work. And I suppose in reality, I probably put the same amount of time in to make the same amount of money as one tent, but I like my goals to be achieved quickly, so I can sit down and sew 10 stuff sacks and know they're done. And it's a lot easier to calculate your profit.
I think a lot of people, just purely because they probably haven't sat and really thought in detail, they probably don't fully understand, as you just quite rightly say, the actual steps you go through when you have a small cottage industry the size that we're talking about with yourself, working in a room somewhere, to, as you say, just a cutting table. Getting a big cutting table, then you've got to have storage for a large amount of material. Then you have to buy a large variety of that amount of material, different colours and different actual fabrics. And your overheads go up exponentially then. And it's very, very difficult to, as you quite rightly say, very, very difficult to create something within a reasonable amount of time and earn a living wage in the process of doing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's one decision I took very early on. I have an hourly rate of profit that I want for every hour I sew. I need to see a certain amount of return, and it's good for me because it keeps the business efficient. I mean, back when I first started, I think one of the things, the trap you fall into, you make stuff that you like, and I learned a very quick lesson in retail that what you like isn't what everybody else wants. You've got to give them what they need. And I culled so many products that I made I thought were really cool, but nobody wanted to buy. So, and plus, like you say, you tying up fabric in stock. It's difficult, and I've worked really hard now I've put one of the only things I use from my old life is my spreadsheet skills. So I've got the spreadsheet which contains all my fabric cost data per square centimetre, and then there's another spreadsheet that works out the size of particular products, and that draws in all the information from the pricing. So I just plug in the dimensions, and then it spits out what pattern to cut, and it spits out what the final price to me is, and calculates margins, eBay fees, PayPal fees, and it just spits out the number at the bottom. Yeah, and I find that now, I diligently use that now because it stops me making mistakes. It stops me sewing things that are just not worth sewing.
When it comes to material, I've got another question here from Alex Wilson, and he said, has the drop in the pound affected your business?
Oh boy, yes. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest issue I've had since the Brexit vote. Fabrics are now 20% more, and that's compounded by, if the fabric goes up 20%, most of the stuff I order comes from Europe and America. So you've then got, particularly on the American orders, you could have VAT and duty, which is obviously more as a percentage because the overall price is higher. It's massive at the moment, and it's really made me think outside the box in terms of the fabrics I offer. Trying to sourcing, more intelligent sourcing has helped a lot. I mean, I used to get my zips from YKK in America. I've now moved to YKK in India because they're just that much cheaper, and it's offset the fall in the pound dollar rate. So, I mean, there are steps you can take. I went over to a Royal Mail business account. That saved me a few quid on postage. So far, touch wood, I've not had to put prices up. But
it's difficult times, though. I mean, we're suffering from exactly the same issues. Everything's gone up 20% at least, and as you rightly say, all the import duties and everything you have to pay, because obviously we're like you, buying in large amounts, can be crippling. The VAT bill on one box can be £2,500, and it's just
I mean,
that's a lot of money to be sitting on the shelf before you sell it.
It is indeed, and as you say, I mean, one of the ways I've got around the rise is to buy more for a better price. But obviously then you're sitting on more stock, and that's your cash flow tied up. When, ideally, I suppose the dream is sew everything to order, wait until you get the order, sew it, and then you're not tying up any fabric. But, you just can't do that. You can't live your life like that.
So of the fabrics that you buy then, you've got Dyneema, you've got Cuban, and you've got some ripstop nylon, I guess. Give people an idea of what they're like to actually work with as a fabric to create something.
It depends what you're constructing, obviously. If you're putting a zip in something, then pretty much any fabric is really nice to sew with. Sil nylon comes into its own wriggly world when you start doing just a standard stuff stack with sil nylon. It doesn't fold, it doesn't crease, it slips. You can help yourself. You can get some rubber feed dogs for the sewing machine, which sort of helps. But yeah, sil nylon's probably the thing I don't like sewing. But, people want kit in it, so you've got to do it. But Cuban's a dream to work with. I mean, I always liken it to, it's like taking a sheet of A4 paper. You fold your top seam over, it just stays there. It's incredibly nice to work with. But it's incredibly expensive, so it wants to be nice to work with. But yeah, no, Cuban is the favourite thing I work with. Dyneema X Grid, that's a great fabric to sew. It's got a nice thick PU coating on it, and it's got a little bit of stretch, so you can pull it and push it to where you need it. But yeah, I mean, none of them, to be honest, are really a nightmare to sew with. The heavier fabrics, I don't use that many of. It tends to be for more sort of, dare I say, sort of bushcraft-based stuff where people want that sort of mil-spec tough thing. I don't do a lot of that, to be honest. Maximum Dyneema X Grid's about 4.6 ounce. That's probably the heaviest fabric I use. But no, once you've learned your way around a sewing machine, nothing is too challenging to sew. But sil nylon, as I'm sure many amateur gear makers out there and even the professional ones will know, it's not fun. It slips around and tries to get away from you at every turn.
What about the gluing part of Cuban fibre? Because I'm told that to get a good, strong join, you need to glue it as well as sew it.
You can, there's a couple of ways with Cuban. I suppose there's three ways. You can actually just glue it. There are glue products on the market which you can literally just paint on. They're a little bit like the old Airfix cement type thing. I think one's called High Sol, something like that. But anyway, it's a solvent-based adhesive that you can paint on and then just chuck your Cuban together. I found it messy. Then you get Cuban tapes, 3M Cuban tapes, so you can bond it with 1/2 inch or 1 inch tape. And that works really, really well. Pretty much the join, once you've done it, is structural. It'll be as strong as the fabric. That works quite nice. And then the sewing. Cuban, people say Cuban doesn't like abrasion. It doesn't like being sewn. And I guess to an extent it doesn't like being sewn, but that's based, it depends on what you're doing. I mean, I have a rule. People are always, people say, can you do me a custom Cuban stuff sack that I can ram my enlightened equipment down quilt into? And I'll say, well, yes, but it'll have to be bonded. Anything that's under compression in a Cuban stuff sack that's sewn will stretch the seams, and then the thread tends to act like cheese wire and start eating through it. So, yeah. But that said, on something like, I don't know, a titanium pot, the Cuban, whatever's inside is static. It's not putting any pressure on the seams. It's great for that sort of use. And I think, yeah, and people get obsessed with Cuban, and with good reason. It's fantastic fabric, but it's not the be all and end all. And I often refuse. I've quite often refused to make certain things in Cuban. I'll say, well, no, it's just not an appropriate fabric. You're only as good as your last product, and I don't want to put stuff out that's going to fail. So,
Interestingly, Mike Pitt has got a question for you, which again you've almost just touched on. When are you going to expand out and do Cuban fibre roll-top stuffs bags?
Yeah, that comes down. I mean, I have made dry bags in the past from Cuban, but it boils down to when you start with a particularly expensive fabric, and then you have to put a lot of time into a product to hit that hourly rate that we were discussing earlier. It's just not viable. So I have to pick the battles I can fight, and roll top dry bags for me are, yeah, I can make them, but they're onerous and they take too long, and I'd have to charge too much. And I it's always that conversation you have with yourself. You want to give people value, and I don't think currently there's much value in doing dry bag type stuff sacks.
Every month, we're holding a special competition where you can win some fabulous outdoor gear. It's a great way to support the Outdoor Station. The more entries we get, the better the future prizes. During the month of January 2017, the prize is a top-of-the-range outdoor sleeping set. This includes the lightest 3-season backpacking mat, the Neo Air X-Lite Regular, a luxurious 100% premium silk sleeping bag liner, and a practical, lightweight pillow sack. The total weight of all these items is only 526 grams, and the combined value is £180. Simply answer the following question and text in your A, B or C answer before the closing date of the 31st of January, and you will be automatically entered. You can enter a maximum of 5 times from the same UK registered mobile phone number. So this month's question is, in the fairy tale Sleeping Beauty, the princess is brought back from the curse of endless sleep by a kiss from A, a frog, B, a donkey, or C, a prince.
To be in with a chance of winning, all you have to do is text outdoors and your answer of A, B or C to 82055, or post your answer with your name and contact phone number to Competition, The Outdoor Station, PO Box 924, Worcester, WR4 4GB. Entries are open to anyone aged 16 plus, and you must have the bill payer's permission. Texts cost £1 plus your standard network rate, and the competition closes at the end of each month. Entries received after that date will not count, but you may still be charged. The winner will be contacted within 3 days of the competition closing, and they may appear in future programmes. For full rules plus terms and conditions, please go to theoutdoorstation.co.uk/competitions.
You started at the beginning saying that you were making items, as we all do, for our own activities. So what's your sort of background experience yourself in outdoors? What are your hobbies, or how did you come to want certain items that weren't available on the shelf?
Yeah, I mean, I think initially I started, and I'm going right back to the beginning of our conversation, people, you tend, as you get older and you get more settled in life, and you've been through your wild young years and the marriage and the kids arriving, and then you approach midlife thinking, right, I need to do something with myself. And for me, it was getting back to camping and the things I did in Scouts and things I did with my dad when I was a kid. We used to spend a lot of time walking, camping, just being outdoors, and it was good fun. And I thought, yeah, I fancy getting back to that. And I think at the time, work was high pressure, and you just wanted to, get to the weekend and just go somewhere quiet and just be. And that's how it began. And that initially manifested itself. I went to bushcraft meets to start with. I found a forum on the interweb and thought, right, yeah, we're going to, let's buy an axe and get out there and do some stuff. And I enjoyed it, and I made a lot of great friends, but I didn't like it was sort of falling out of a car and going camping for a weekend, and there was a lot of drinking around, and I thought, this is not what I want. I want to get out, I want to relax, but I don't really want to sit and drink and not do a lot. I want to go for a walk. And that's when I sort of basically sold all my heavy equipment that I'd got, all the canvas stuff and all the military sort of Bergens, and all that went out the window. And then, I started looking at, right, well, let's buy some stuff that will get me into the hills. And that quickly accelerated into, where do I find the lightest stuff available? And I think it was a hobby that turned into a business, really. And, I love to get out as often as I can.
Have you found with the range of products that you're doing now on eBay, I see, and ultralight, of course, your knowledge or your need for knowledge about the products that people are asking you to make bags for has had to increase as a result?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I first started out, I was giving them what I thought they wanted. Now I'm much more, I think Twitter and Facebook, social media. I spend a lot of time on, there's a great new lightweight forum in the UK, treklite.com, and that's trek-lite.com. And there's a lot of serious lightweight walkers, people who have done PCTs and all the rest of it on there. And I find that invaluable in terms of getting feedback from what people need and what didn't go well, what went well. And following on from that, just wider web research, and it's not always about, I mean, there's plenty of existing stuff that's out there and you think, oh, that's a good looking product. And then you get it and it doesn't quite work. And you think, well, it's nearly there. How can I improve it and take it the extra mile and make it what it needs to be? But yeah, I mean, research is huge. I mean, if I'm not working, generally I'm glued to a laptop or a tablet, or I'm, like any confirmed kit tart, I'm quite happy to talk about gear all day long, and generally do.
Have you found yourself, like us almost, spending more time indoors than outdoors?
Yeah. I mean, that is a big problem. I mean, if I didn't, I thank the Lord for the dog, because if I didn't have a dog, I don't think I'd go anywhere. But border collies are never backwards in coming forwards when telling you I need my hour run. So yeah, but I go out in the morning with the dog, and I just treat that as my commute, and then we'll go out again. Sometimes we'll nick off early and go out at lunchtime or whatever. But yeah, it can eat away at your hill time, and certainly that's one of my New Year's resolutions this year is get out more. Last year was a crap year. I mean, I've normally always do at least one overseas trip a year. That didn't happen. I think I only had one 4-day trip. I think that was the longest. We did 4 days up near Loch Sween, and yeah, it was good, but it wasn't long enough.
Well, looking at the long list, I've got eBay open at the moment and 2 pages there, and there's an awful lot of variety of bags for pots and pans, and obviously additional peg bags and that sort of stuff. What has taken you by surprise as being the most popular or item, or the one you've had most demand for?
You get an idea as soon as you list something. You never know until you list it. But I think for me, the best-selling items have always been Cuban fibre, and within that specifically, the Cuban fibre lanterns are probably my best-selling item. I mean, I'm constantly making those. They go really quick, and you can have a little light in your tent for 7 grams. I think it's a no-brainer for a lot of people. Some people have bought 4, 5, 6. They've got one in every shelter and on every hammock ridgeline they own. So yeah, I think it's my favourite product out of all of them. It's almost the one that, when you first start a business and you're looking on Google to see if anyone's mentioned anything that you do, and you're thinking, what will it be? And it's always been the lantern for me. People tend to, comment on that quite a lot.
Well, another question I've got here that's come in from Pete Turner. Another name you know. Is this the Pete you referred to?
Pete's a very good friend of mine. I'm dreading this now. Has he got orange in it anywhere?
No. Your private life's entirely your own. I'd like to ask Paul where he sees the UK cottage gear making industry in 5 years' time.
I think the word I'd use around the cottage making gear industry in the UK is an opportunity that's not being grasped, I think is where I'd see it. I mean, I know personally people who could easily be running their own Z packs. They've got all the skills to do it. Pete's one of them, actually. But people don't seem to grasp the nettle and go for it. And I understand a lot of that is, particularly the way the economic climate is at the minute, and ordering fabric from overseas isn't ideal, and it's not cheap. I mean, I've been talking to Dyneema to say, look, come on, you bought Cubic Tech now. Why can't you shift product to Europe and disseminate it within the free trade agreement, which we currently enjoy, without us, it's easier for them to move it to Europe and then sell it to European companies than it is for us to buy from America and have huge amounts of freight, VAT, and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I just think there's a lot of people out there that could do very well, but they choose not to. And I think some of the current crop of cottage makers have damaged the reputation of what cottage industry is. There's been one or two high profile issues with people losing money and owed money, etc. But there are also some good ones out there. I mentioned Trekker Tent earlier. They're putting out some really well-made stuff. I'd like to see, personally, as a hammocker, I love my hammock. I'd like to see some better quilt makers in the UK. There's stuff out there, but it's not a patch on what's coming out of America. But yeah, I mean, I see it as a huge opportunity out there for someone to take on the big ticket items and run with it. And I think, if you want a UL backpack, generally most people are looking to MLD or Z packs if you want stuff at the really low end. I love the Mariposa and the Gorilla and stuff like that. I don't like it when they changed the fabric. I thought they took a great pack and ruined it. But obviously, fabric's a personal choice. But I'd like to see it go back to the old Dyneema grid. But yeah, that stopped me buying a Mariposa. I ended up with an MLD Exodus, which I'm just about to sell.
Well, I can empathise with what you say about the quilt manufacturer in particular. I'm not too sure if you know, but we were trying to get some quilts made. We started with UK Hammocks doing some quilts for us. And we tried to take it a stage further, and I spent a whole year going up and down the motorway up to Preston and various places for people to make samples for me, and nobody I could find in 12 months in this country could make a quilt to a standard that we would have found acceptable in the outdoor industry. And I was horrified.
Yeah, it is pretty grim. And, I mean, I've got hammock gear quilts. I have got a quilt I made myself, but I can stand 2 days of crawling around on the floor if it's for my own use at the end of it. But yeah, I mean, for hammock gear quilts, I mean, to put that in context, I used to have a UK Hammocks winter underquilt, which probably weighed about a kilo, with huge amounts of down in it, and high quality shell materials, high quality down in it, big baffles, huge amount of fill, and that was rated to, -20. And I found it as warm as my hammock gear incubator, which is rated to 0. And it was all about the fit. The people, I think in the UK, there's been no competition, so there's no one to push you to make your gear what it should be. And, differential cuts on particularly on underquilts are really important to get that fit around the body and stop air gaps. And yeah, some things you've just got to pay for, I think, is the message. But it is a shame. You're right. I think, there are so many opportunities out there for someone who can put together a good quilt, top quilt and underquilts.
Do you think with the access to the internet and the information that's about and this conversation in some respects, people assume that it's really easy to customise something?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of custom work, and it's a double-edged sword. You never ever make the same amount of money you'll make on a stock item, because the time you've flipped 3-4 emails back and forth to select fabrics and shapes, and you can easily put an hour into the prep, and by the time you've made the product, you've made no money on it. But I think custom kit is important. I do it more as a customer service and for the benefits that come with that than I do for the money. And sometimes I get great new product ideas out of it. Your biggest bonus I have is that most of my customers are serious hill walkers. They're very, what's the word? They're really engaged with their subject matter, and they know what they're talking about. And I get some amazing ideas just come from people who say, right, I'd like you to make one of these in custom. And I finish it and I think, do you know what? That's a really good idea. And if that happens, I'll generally say, right, well, you can have yours for free, because that's going to be a stock item. So, yeah, but I think people, I mean, sewing's not rocket science at the end of the day. Some of it takes longer, some of it's a bit more faffy and involved and frustrating. But for the most part, if you can sew a straight line, you can make it.
Yeah, I think it's probably people's assumption that getting hold of the right technical fabric for the product they think they want to make is going to be the hardest part, because obviously you've got Pennine Outdoor and is it True North?
Point North, yeah.
Yeah, Point North that do materials, but sometimes what you're trying to explain to somebody saying, like, I want a piece of material that does this, you may not be translating it correctly or asking the right question to get the right material. And I think it can be an expensive mistake, can't it, if you get the wrong material?
It can, and people tend to want to jump straight to the Gucci fabrics. Is it lightest? Is it prettiest? That's what I want. And Cuban fibre is great, but in the context of what I make, the difference in an 8-inch by 4-inch square box pouch in 1.1 sil nylon compared to Cuban fibre, it's a couple of grams. It's when you're dealing with small items, fabric selection gets less important, because the overall result is whatever you make of a small size will always be light. So, when you start, for me, if I was looking at tents and packs and the big items, then your fabrics make a huge difference to the finished weight. But in small items, it doesn't. And as much as I sell a lot of Cuban and a lot of 1.1 ounce sil stuff, I'm quite happy working with heavyweight cam materials, because when it's all said and done, it might be double the weight of Cuban, but it'll still be well under 10 grams and well under the weight of whatever you were using before. So I think there's no need to, when you're teaching yourself, just buy something cheap. There's tons and tons of 70 denier, sort of 55 gram sil nylon from places like Point North and Chandler's, and eBay's full of it as well. You can pay £5 or £6 a meter for stuff to learn with, and then when you want to really get down to the nitty gritty and go super low weight, then by all means get the Cuban when you know what you're doing.
I think I found myself, it was a big surprise as well, that when I did start sewing something that was half decent, the actual strength of a simple line of stitching is phenomenal.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I mean, you look at it and you think, how? Why is it so strong? But you really, that's one of the messages I struggle to get out, is lightweight doesn't mean fragile. Cuban for its weight is stronger than steel, and that's a line that's trotted out quite a lot. But it is bloody strong fabric, and I don't baby my kit. I don't abuse it, but I'm certainly not super careful with my gear. And I've got Cuban fibre stuff that I've had in my pack for 3 years, and it's still going strong. It looks a bit beat up, but there's no holes in it, and it still does the job. There is a misconception out there, I think, that lightweight and super lightweight kit won't last, because it does if you look after it.
Okay, well, we're coming to the end. I think we've touched on most things that people wanted me to ask you. Again, looking on your eBay shop, but of course there will be a link to this in the show notes for people who are listening. I can see there's 108 items. What else have you got up your sleeve that you're working on, or you're going to be bringing out in the next season, I guess?
I've just started rolling out, stuff sacks for pots and things have gone through an evolution. They started off square, that you put a round pot in, and then they went round and sort of three-dimensional. And now, in order to get an even better fit, I'm going with round sort of cylinder, but with a zip-off top. Makes loading easier, and it's just a neater looking product. They take a bit longer to make. They cost a little bit more than a standard stuff sack, but they are really ergonomic, and they do work well. So I'm currently rolling out the rest of the range on that. So for every stove and pot that I make, eventually there'll be zip-off top ones for that. A guy on the Tretlite forum from Germany has just commissioned a set of internal packing cells for clothes, food, and kitchen stroke other items, and I've almost finished that. I've done a few prototypes. I think I'll be rolling that out as a product. They're quite nice. I use a big stuff sack as a food bag, and I find it doesn't fit my pack very well. So they're sort of like square with a zip off top. Think deep pan suitcase. So yeah, those will be coming out. A lot more in my first aid pouch range. I used to do quite a popular white Cuban hybrid first aid pouch, but white Cuban hybrid has become impossible to get hold of now. So I'm just looking at options for moving into normal Cuban at a bit of a higher weight. So that'll be coming out. There's tons of stuff on my list. I mean, I've got notes on my phone, and I'm always jotting down ideas for things that I think might be next. I get harassed a lot for chest packs, front packs, which, to be honest, are fairly easy to make. The difficulty with those is all packs have different mounting positions, and the hardware and terminal bits are difficult to match up so that you get a product that fits a lot of packs. So yeah, some things there's a lot there I want to do, but I haven't found a logical approach to getting a good solution. There's no point in me having to make a different chest pack for every pack out there. So so it's stuff like that, but more and more accessories. I mean, you get to a point with accessories where you keep thinking, well, there must be nothing left to go at, but you always seem to come up with new ideas. So yeah, I don't tend to launch a new range on an annual basis. They just sort of get introduced as and when I get time.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that chat with Paul. It's good to hear a UK cottage manufacturer going from strength to strength in these ever-fluctuating times. If you want to see his range of products or catch up with his social media, all the links, of course, are over on the page on the Outdoors Station website. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast the Adventure Travel Show in London Olympia on the 21st and 22nd of January. If you'd like to go and save some money on the entry price, then head over to their website, adventureshow.com, and use the promo code Outdoors Station when booking or phoning the number on their website. So that's about it. My thanks, of course, to Paul, and also my executive producer, Roman Ackle, and to everyone who has joined in with the newsletter and made these suggestions. It's well worth doing so to keep up to date and share new people of interest with our ever-growing audience. So until next time, folks, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear or see more from our extensive free library, please visit theoutdoorstation.co.uk.